Yeah, because the back one's eased on. Yeah. So that you can move your arm. Back is longer.
Hi. That was loud.
I'm gonna get a water real quick.
Working.
Is it? We're checking the microphone. Somebody tell Rachel the mic works.
Hi, Christy and Samantha.
We got some new people. I don't know if they're new, but we have some new people. I think.
Are you gonna have time to talk about pants?
Pants? No.
Christy and Samantha are asking.
Hi, guys. I don't know what.
I heard you go, no.
No, we're not talking about pants. Maybe. I don't know. We'll find out.
I'm sure we'll work it in.
We'll work it in. I'm going to get some water, and then I think I'm ready. I've just had coffee.
Are any of you guys new?
I think there's a name I didn't recognize.
If you're new, if you have any questions or comments, you just go to the little questions drop down in the bottom right. And your microphones are turned off. So that's how you communicate.
Someday we'll let everybody talk. It'll be amazing. Is the windows too bright or they're okay?
Is the windows too bright? Did you really just say that? No, they're not.
Okay.
Is the windows too bright? Travis had like 3 people in his class.
3 people?
Growing up.
Oh, yeah.
All of them are in prison.
But he learned a lot of practical stuff.
No, he didn't. He taught himself.
Corn and make our own chewing gum from things you find in the cupboard. Things like that. We chewed on sugar cane. We rendered our own fat. We made molasses. I think.
Oh,
whoops. I have a knot in my cord, and then we're ready to go. Oh, I was trying to hide it. Hang on.
You can see it.
Once I get this undone, we'll get started.
Horrible.
The clinking of it. I don't want to unplug it from the back.
That's a pretty bad knot.
Do I have enough length to do everything? Yeah. Okay. All right. Should we face it to me or just get started? We'll just get started. I'll say hello. I like to be on camera.
What's your shirt say?
Seattle, Washington. This is one of those things you buy when you're at the airport and it's cold and you didn't charge your iPad. I love it. It's not as good as the Springfield State Correctional Facility one. So we have a couple new folks today, so everything will be brand new. But we have a bunch of folks who have done our Leotard 2 and our Booty Short class. So I kind of like replanned what the plan was. And I sent everybody the link to the Booty Short day just to review, or a couple of our new folks don't have it, which is why if you've taken our other class, you'll see an email from me saying to pick 2 patterns. I did that just to kind of like level the playing field and keep it fair, since some of this information is review, but there's nothing wrong with review. And a lot of what we're gonna just look at is combining stuff that many of you have already done. So we're gonna be using the Costume Technician book, and we're gonna draft a man's body block, but we're gonna do math similar to the Booty Short or stretch sleeve, where we are going to reduce our measurements first so that we end up with a top drafted to fit stretch fabric. That said, you can also use the same idea by like coming up with the negative ease, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And you can draft the sleeve out of this book too, smaller. But for today, we're going to use our same stretch sleeve instructions. And since this is a repeat for most of you, I'm going to go through it pretty quick, but everybody will get the video too. Then what we're going to do is we're going to combine the Booty Short, the stretch sleeve I like to do and the man's block from the book to make a man's stretch block so that you can use that to adapt all your different style lines to create a unitard, to create a bike tard. They need a better name for that, bike tard. To create a unitard, to create like a man's dance shirt with sleeves, without sleeves, change the necklines, all of that stuff. So for a bunch of you, it'll be like just putting some of the different things we've done all together now. So I think it'll be a good class, and the stuff that we're going to repeat and re-show. So we're not going to draft a short. We're going to actually draft a pair of tights from the waist to the ankle, and that's what we're going to start with. So we're going to start off with the same info like we're making a short, but we're going to actually draft a pair of tights. So we're going to have a separate tight pattern and then a top pattern, and then you can combine the patterns. So that's going to be more of what today is and a little bit less of sewing. But one thing I am going to show you is when we've got just the tight, I'm going to show you one way that we like to use the wide elastic to make a shaped waistband. So we're going to actually make a waistband where the front is lower than the back, because it sits on the guys much better than just a band that goes straight around. And I'm going to also show you how sometimes we'll put a thin elastic in the back seam of the butt to snug the front crotch towards the guy. Because one thing that the guys hate is when they've got little pillows of air on either side of their tools. So that's what we're gonna look at that a little bit too. So everybody that's done the booty shorts, just watch along and listen along to what we're gonna change. And everybody that this is new, if you haven't printed out your instructions yet, because a few of you I spaced and I thought everybody already had the booty short notes, but some of them I just sent. So my apologies. So let's start with that. And I've already done some of my short onto the paper, but let's look at the things that we're going to add to this, because we want to make it go all the way down to the ankle. So similar to our sleeve and our shorts, we're going to decide what amount of negative ease we want going around the body and what negative amount we have going up and down on the body. So on our waist, full hip, thigh rise, or our waist, full hip, and thigh, we're taking that times 0.88, which makes it 12% tighter around the body. Our vertical measurements, like our waist to the full part of the hip and waist to the hem, we're taking times 0.92, which makes it 8% shorter up and down. So generally, we want to end up with something that's a little tighter up and down and a smidge tighter, or we want something that's tight, more tight around than it is tight up and down. And there's some good notes at the end of the sleeve instructions that just kind of talk about playing with the 0.92 or the times 0.88 and how you can adapt those for different stretches. So now I'm going to let you guys do the math, and I also put the booty short video link to everybody so you can watch the whole short class. But now we're going to elaborate on that. So here's where we're going to take what most of you have learned, what is new for some folks, but watch the booty short link. Now, aside from our original measurements, if we're going to make ankles, we now have pattern happening below the thigh, below the waist, below the hips. So I also want to know the measurement, the original measurement for around my thigh, around my knee, around my calf, and around my ankle. Now, if your measurement sheets has above knee, below knee, at calf, below calf, you can also add those circumferences to this. The more info you have, you just keep plugging it into your pattern, and the more gourmet your pattern will be. So the thigh, knee, calf, and ankle circumferences, we're going to take also times 0.88. So I have my original thigh and my new thigh, my original knee and my new knee. So 14 times 0.88. Let's do that one. And you'll also see that I've rounded it. So I'm going to take 14 for the distance around my knee times 0.88 is 12.3. So I just rounded it to 12. And all of these calculations, I just tell people to round it to the closest inch, or if you want to get ultra precise, you can round it to the closest half inch. Now, so now we have more measurements going up and down. So we don't need just our waist to the hem. And I'm still starting out with as if I was making shorts. Now I want to know my waist to thigh, also 12 inches. So that would have been my hem for shorts. Then how far down is the knee? How far down is the calf? How far down is the ankle? And I also took that all times 0.92 because we're making it a little less tight up and down. Then the next part of this sheet, which is review for a lot, we're going to take our waist, divide it in half. And for those who is new, I just can't talk at all today. I'm waking up. Their own prison, everybody went to school with. Once you've done your adjustments, figured out your negative ease or your negative stretch, you want to X out these original numbers because we don't care about them anymore. We only want the tightened number. So we're going to divide our waist in half. We're going to divide our hip in half. We're going to take our new hip and divide it by 9 to figure out the back crotch. And then we're going to also figure out the difference between the new hip and the new waist. Half of them is going to be 3 inches. And then we're going to put some darts in this pattern. And we're going to take this result down here. We're going to take 3 divided by 3. How easy is that? It comes up to 1. So now let's go to the paper. And some of this we're going to go faster through. I repeat myself a lot. It's just today is like a little bit different of a circumstance based on new people and people that have already done this, because it's really similar to the women's stuff, but we're just combining a few more things. So I started out with my original rectangle in step 1, and then I added to my thigh. So actually my A to E in this next measurement, that was my adjusted waist to thigh from my worksheet. Then we're just going to blast through some of these. Then step 3, I divided my original rectangle in half. So step 3 is finding out the side. And also, when I found my A to E, my waist to the side of the short or my waist to thigh, I also put in, from my adjustments, I measured how far down it was from the waist to the ankle. So this top line is our waist at our side seam. We went all the way down to the ankle, which was 37 inches. So now let's put some of these other measurements we found out, our vertical measurements. So my waist to thigh, my new one, is 11. So this is kind of where my thigh is. So I'm going to write in thigh. Then to my knee was 20 inches. So I'm going to give myself a mark there, and I'm going to say that's my knee. And then my calf was 25 inches down. And again, I'm using the adjusted measurements. So these are new points now. So essentially we're making this short, but we're extending it all the way down to the ankle. Same for woman, same for kid, same for all sorts of things. So now I have, right, we have a big piece of paper today. I've got my waist, thigh, knee, calf, and ankle all on here. So we just continued our instructions for where we were finding points that go from the top down. Now that we're going to the ankle, we're just continuing further down the page, okay? So now let's see. I've got my side. So I've got my side marked on here. And then the next thing that we're going to do, we're going to jump to step 4 on the shorts page, where we're going to mark G. And G is on our measurement page. That is our 3.5 inches. So we took our full hip and divided it by 9. So this is going to be the back curve of our short. And then I also marked H, same as the short, the space between C and G, up 1/4 inch. And there's some good notes in here for the new folks to read about changing the shape of the butt a little bit. Then we are going to mark the front crotch. So over here on the right, this is going to be the front crotch where D and I are on your sheet. That's going to be the front crotch of our tights. And then now we're going to work through step 6 and step 7, and we're going to put some new points in which are going to become darts. So we figured out also on the measurement sheet our width of dart. So starting in step 6, that 1 inch, that's going to be our dart, okay? So I split my first fit dart on either side of the side seam. The next fit dart goes from A to the right. That's our second fit dart, which is going to be the butt. Then at step 7, we find the space between points 2 and 3. And all these points, each new point shows up in your instructions. And that vertical spot, we're going to make a vertical line from there. That's going to be line J. So line J is like the fullest part of the butt. Like line J is like where the butt comes out and then back in at the waist on a man or a woman. Now let's get to point 8. We're going to mark L on the JK line. So this is JK. L is how far down was it from the waist to the fullest part of the hip. And our adjusted measurement is 8 inches. So I'm going to come down 8 inches. And I'm going to mark L. And then there's just a little note here too about if you don't know that measurement, but you know the rise, you can figure out where L is. I'm going to zoom to step 9, and we're going to put in some more construction darts. So this top line right now is the waist, and we're splitting a dart over J. So we have 1 inch at the side taken away, 1 inch at the back, and we're going to take away 1 inch at J. So we're taking away ½ an inch on either side. Pretty soon you guys will just be able to do this with no instructions at all. Now, let's look at the next thing. So the bottom part of step 9 is somewhere where it's going to be a little bit different to make tights. So we're going to split 6 and 7 on this K line, on the JK line, at E and F, and we want to be about 2½ inches below below the below the CD line. So below C and D, we want to be around 2½ inches below for our next dart. So I'm going to just kind of eyeball the bottom line. It worked out that is 2½ inches. But notice here that points 6 and 7 doesn't have to be on this EF line. It can be below it, which is okay. And there's a little note about that. Now we're going to put in all of these darts. So we're going to connect 6 and 7 up to the CD line. And we are going to connect L up to 4 and 5. And I like to extend these lines up above the page. Then we are going to connect our side seam all the way down to the CD line. And as you're looking at the instructions, pretty much every new line is represented. Every time a new line is made, it shows up in the picture. Okay. Now, and if somebody's totally lost, flag Rachel down. But know that you are getting this recording. How many more times should I say that? I repeat myself.
7.
Because before we started, I said, remember to tell them they're getting the recording. Okay, now we are going to figure out how high up above the butt does the back of the short need to be. And that's if you lay a good pair of pants, if you lay a nice pair of pants on a table or anything, a skirt or whatever, there's the front of your pair of pants, there's the fly. The back of your pair of pants should sit higher. The center back of your pants should sit higher because that gives room for the fabric to come out over the butt. And we're going to do the same thing with our tights pattern that we're creating here. If the back of our tights is the same height as the front, what happens, I'm going to draw a butt. Yeah, there's a butt. If the back of the tights is the same height, you have this problem. And then the other thing that happens is the front of your tights bag in a funny way because there's not enough room coming from the back. The front gets yanked to the back to try to cover up their butt cheeks. I think that's an okay drawing. It's an 8. It's an 8 with a board next to it. Sometimes you draw a butt. Okay, so we're going to find M, and we're going to use our adjusted rise from the worksheet, which is 9 inches. So M is going to be above 0.3, an inch and 3/4. So that's going to be the back of our pants. Now we're going to go to A and C and mark O halfway between them and 1/4 inch to the right. So this is going to be 0.0. And now we're going to make the back seat of our shorts here. So we are going to connect G to H to O to M with a straight line and a curve. And if you've got an assortment of curves, you might find that you've got one that pretty much does it all at once. And actually, this Serbian ruler I've got hits all the points at the same time. And you can stray a little bit from any of these points. Like I strayed a little bit from O, I strayed a little bit from H. That's okay, because it's stretchy fabric. Okay. Now we're going to make the front crotch and the front inseam. So where D and I are over here, we're going to just make a short curve. We don't want this to go way up here. We want to get it, like actually a good thought is that however far I is from D, that's about kind of, your curve shouldn't go any higher than that. So that's our front crotch. And then we're going to pencil in I to F. And that is kind of our front inseam. Now, the next thing we are going to do is put in these other points because we're making tights now and not a short. So we've got to deal with our knee, our calf, and our ankle down here, which is out of view. So we're going to kind of keep the instructions in our mind, but now we're going to stray from them just a little bit. If you look ahead to step, let's see, to step P, that is figuring out what our adjusted thigh is, how far over our adjusted thigh is from the center front inseam to the back inseam. So let's look at our adjusted thigh measurement, and it's 19 inches. So I'm going to go over from my front, I'm going to go over 19 inches. So now what's weird, right, is we've got this dart right here, which we can either put the dart in and take it out of our pattern later, or we can eliminate the dart right now. So I think for now, I'm going to leave the dart in and then we're going to work it out. So if my thigh needs to be 19 inches, my new thigh, to fit straight around the guy's thigh, all those new lights reflect really bad onto the ruler. Let me turn that one off. We put up some different lights thinking it would be better, but it's not. It's weird though, the other one hasn't shown in the ruler so bad before. Yeah, that one light we can't turn off. Okay, so to put in my thigh, we're gonna get rid of this dart later, so I've got to add it into my 19. So my dart's an inch wide, so I'm actually going to go over 20 inches. And that's going to be, essentially, that's kind of my back inseam. But we can take it away later on here. So now let's use the same idea about circumference that we did for the waist and the hip and deal with our knee, ankle, and calf. So I'm going to look at these new circumferences around. My knee is 12, my calf is 13, and my ankle is 10.5. So I'm going to split my knee on each side of the sideline. So our sideline, we continue down, and I'm going to start putting my knee on there. Then we need to do the calf, which was the adjusted measurement is 13 around. And actually, you guys, I measured this dress form, which has some pretty emaciated legs. So your project for your first person is going to look not so narrow because he's got a weird shape, but it's going to fit the dress for him. My ankle is 10.5, so I'm going to go 5 1/4 on each side of my ankle. Rachel, how's it going?
Well,
what? She's a makeup tutorial. Rachel's watching some cool makeup stuff. Is it that guy? There's a guy that does the most amazing makeup. Okay, so now we're almost to the home stretch. So now we've got to connect our crotch and all that stuff all the way down. And then here we've got to get from our knee back over to our thigh. And we also want to deal with getting rid of this inside dart here. Or actually some older tight patterns. Maybe we'll keep the dart. Some of the really nice old Milskin company used to put out a set of patterns where they kept this seam over the guy's butt all the way down in the tight because it gave you something to adjust other than just this seam that kind of ends up the inseam. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that this dart at 6 and 7 is just going to continue straight down and stop just a little bit above the knee, so that we're going to have a really nice shaped pair of tights here. And like those of you that were in pattern drafting or the Leo course, if we don't want this dart here, we're just going to divide this dart in half. So it's like a kite with a left and a right. And we're going to take away that much over here at the back and that much over here at the front. And then this dart is gone, okay? So now I'm going to take a curved ruler and I'm going to start curving in and out. And just lay your curves thinking about like the way the body is moving a little bit, you know? You could also probably just make it straight lines and you'd be good. But like I've got where my calf is, I've actually got a bump out at the calf. And then it goes into the knee and then it bumps back out again towards the thigh. The other thing here is my center back seam is kind of running straight down. I'm going to cheat a little bit and I'm going to scoot it in about 1/2 inch. I want it for this guy. And this is one of those things that like your measurements are going to be a little bit different from person to person. But check this out. By scooting that in at this point, 1/2 inch, I've tightened up that point of my dart a little bit already. So I could say that my dart now has already become narrower because I've taken some of the dart away already at the back. Did that lose anybody? I know it's weird that I'm drawing it over with a Sharpie. So now my dart is just going to be this area that I've made darker because I lost some of my dart already over here. So now I'm going to just continue down my back, curving in and out. And if a curve doesn't match up, it usually means you just need to flip your ruler. So I'm going to curve in and out. So in at my knee, out at my calf, and back into my ankle. And then where you have kind of like a weird looking pointy curve, just take your ruler and find the point at which you can soften that curve a little bit. Okay, so we're getting rid of that. So we're almost there. We're going to deal with a little bit at the waist, and then we're going to true up these measurements before we go any further. How's everybody doing? Hopefully the folks that have done shorts are like, I get it. You can make tights now with this. And this is curvy because we're following the dress form. Everybody's curves are going to be different. So like if I knew the guy's above knee, if I knew how far it was to his above knee, I would pencil in his above knee and put in that point also. If I knew where his below calf was, I'd measure down that far and pencil that in. The more points you know, the more perfect this is going to fit. But also imagine that you have adjustments to make. And I do have a set of feet. If someone reminds me, I can email everybody just a printout of Lycra feet, so you could plug a foot onto the bottom of this to make your own unitard pattern. So now what I'm going to do is I've got to get from my center front up to M, but I don't want to deal with these darts. So I'm going to fold my darts away, and I'm going to put my curved ruler and go from my center front all the way up to M. And this little bit at the very center back. So by closing the darts up, I'm making the edge nice and not jaggedy. At M, I want a little bit of a square. I want a 90-degree angle. So I'm just going to shave off a little bit of my pattern until I can get a right angle at M. Okay? So let's cut this out. And then we're going to do a sleeve and a torso, and then we're going to start marrying them together. So if you want low-rise tights, right, so we can work these darts out too, and that's in the short video. But if I want low-rise tights, I want to draft them still from the waist and then remove from the top, because the waist is a definite thing where we know where it is pretty much. We pretty much know where the hip and crotch are. So it's easier to draft it up to the waist, then come back and eliminate what you don't want to be on the pattern, okay? So I'm going to cut this out really, really quick. This is a good time for a question. And in the notes too, it shows you how to make the front of this on the fold, how to get rid of the front crotch, which we might do when we combine this with our torso. And we have a unisex tight pattern that fits pretty good on men and women, and a man's unitard. But this is great because you can just make whatever you need always without even having to buy our pattern. Yeah.
Is a man's waist where he bends side to side?
Yeah, so in patterning, we put here, face it to me. I don't have a waist, but if I did. So when we're drafting patterns, you know, like people wear their pants like way too low, or they wear them way too high. I'm in the mid, mine are usually low, or they're under my ribs. Like your anatomy waist for patterning, most pattern makers put it like where your ribs break. So I always have the guys and girls bend towards my finger so that I can find out where their like body is really hinging. And mine's surprisingly high. I'm super duper short-waisted. Like in my belly button. Where's it at? My gross belly button is like, my belly button is like an inch from my sternum, because I've got really long legs. In fact, when I bend, my bottom 3 ribs curl under my hip bones. It's gross. Okay, so that's my side story. Now let's do the sleeve quick, and then we're going to revisit some pattern drafting from the costume technician book. So the sleeve for this guy, let's see if I even have enough paper, or I can get a new piece of paper. Okay. Now let's look a little bit at the measurements and the reduction of stretch that we did. When we use this sleeve block for girls, I find that the ladies like their sleeves really tight. Like no matter how tight you make the pattern, they always go, I want this. So I just start off by reducing my sleeve for a girl more. We take it times 0.84, which makes the sleeve tighter. We're going to make a change to this right now, and we're going to do our circumferences around the sleeve the same as we did for the short. We're going to take our around measurements times 0.88. So here for the guy where this said 0.84, I'm actually going to change it to an 8. And then also read this last page because it gives you some good insight. If you make this up, your sample, and you feel it's a little tight, raise this number. If you make this up and you feel it's a little loose, lower this number. And then soon, between like jumbo spandex, lycra, sheer mesh, you start to get an idea in your head of like, this is how I'm going to treat this fabric versus this fabric. Then you just reprint this out and make your notes for your new fabric, okay? So let's just do the math on this one quick. We just picked a generic arm. So my shoulder to wrist, and we always have people bend their arm, was 26. I'm going to make it 8% shorter. So 26 times 0.92 is 23.9. So we're going to make it 24. We're going to round because it's stretchy fabric. My shoulder to elbow, 12 times 0.92 is going to be, well, that's not right. 0.92 is going to be 11. My shoulder to armpit, we're going to use this measurement chart down here. So my shoulder to armpit is going to be based on my shoulder to wrist. It is, so my shoulder was 26. So my shoulder to armpit is going to be 4.5. Sometimes we just give a chart if it's something we've kind of already figured out. Why have a formula, right? Now, my circumferences for my arm, we're going to take times 0.88 instead of 0.84, because we're going to say this guy doesn't want it as tight as the last girl. And then also think about where we added in all these other heights and circumferences for the guy. If you know how far it is to their forearm, how far it is to their bicep, different things, you can plot that in too and start to stray from the instructions. So we're going to take their arm's eye and divide it by 6. So, and we're using the original arm's eye because we haven't multiplied it times anything yet. That's going to be 3.3, so I'm going to just say 3. Next, subtract the above result from the arm's eye. So this is helping us figure out how much we're shrinking the arm's eye. So we're going to take 20 minus 3. I could have done that one in my head. That's 17. So that's going to give us the base of our arm's eye. And now we're going to reduce it for stretch. So we're going to take 17 times 0.88 instead of 8.4. Because we're making the guys a little bit looser. So it's going to be 15. And then we're going to take, the above result, this line here, look at, I don't even know what I'm doing. It says put 17 in there, take it times 0.88 is 15. That's going to be line 1 on our sheet. Then we're going to do our bicep, 15 times 0.88. You know, these dollar store calculators aren't that great. I'm going to round it to 13. Then our elbow, around our elbow is 13 times 0.88. 11, we can say 11.5 even. Our wrist was 8 times 0.88. 7. And then when I was at Houston Ballet and was constantly doing math and figuring things out, since I'm not good with math, I would make myself pages. So if I was doing stretch for a few days, I would just make a chart with all the whole numbers times 0.88, times 0.9, times 0.82, so that I could just bang stuff out instead of sitting here with a calculator every time. Okay, so now let's draft this. We are going to put, what's odd here is this first page of instructions. We did it for a set of measurements. So we pretended this was our shoulder to wrist, this was our shoulder to elbow, this was our result from the chart, and these are our circumferences. So if you want to fill this in, you need to go back and put the math in that we just did instead of just copying the example that's in the pages. So I do know, though, that my line A to E is my shoulder to elbow, and line A to E is my shoulder to wrist, and A to D is my shoulder to elbow. A to B is my shoulder to armpit, and then the measurements going across is going to be my arm's eye. So if you look at the first page, line 1 is my arm's eye, line 3 is my elbow, then we find line 2, which is between 1 and 3, and then the wrist. So I'm going to start putting those numbers in. So so actually I should make sure my paper is wide enough, right? So my paper needs to be wide as line A. So if my paper is 15 inches wide, we're good to go. Is it? Is it? Is it? Nope. Let me get a new piece of paper. We have a giant roll of paper coming tomorrow, a few 100 pounds. We used to like measure how much work we did in a season by like, did we use a few packs of rhinestones? Then we started measuring by how many, several hundred yards of paper did we go through. And we've been going through paper really, really fast. Faster every year. Okay, so I'm gonna put in line A to E, which is my shoulder to wrist, which is the adjusted. So just like the shorts, we only care about the adjusted measurement now. So A to E is going to be 24. I need a juicier Sharpie. Then my shoulder to elbow, so that's A to D, that's going to be 11. So my elbow is going to be here at 11. So that's my elbow, that's my shoulder, that's my wrist. So this is A, this is D, this is E, this is line 3, which we're going to adjust here in a minute. Then I also know how far down is my armpit from my shoulder. We came up using the chart, is 4.5 inches down. So I'm going to come down 4.5 inches from A. And that's going to be the cap of my sleeve there. Okay, so now we're going to we're actually going to mark up more of our horizontal lines. But between B, so point B is my shoulder to armpit, we need to put C, which is halfway between B and D, okay? And that's the bicep. So now let's put in our horizontal measurements across the sleeve. So my new armhole, or arm side, is 15. So I'm going to go 7.5 on each side of that. So like the short, we're just splitting across the line. My new bicep is 13, and I'm getting that from my measurement chart. My new elbow, and we always measure people's elbow like this because it's bigger like this than it is like this. If you measure it around open on most folks, this is tiny. And if you patterned it that tiny, especially on a guy, when they bend, it's going to be too tight around. And it's always easier to take something away. So my elbow was 11.5. So I'm going to go 5 3/4 on either side. And my new wrist is going to be 7 inches, so 3.5 on each side. So had we measured down to a forearm, we could put yet another space between here to figure more in and out, okay? Okay, so we've already done page 1, our instructions, page 2. Page 3, we are now going to connect line 1 up to A as shown in this diagram. So we're going to connect that up to there. We're going to connect that up to here. And then the next thing it tells us is to divide each side of this shape into thirds. And you can do it with a calculator, you can do it with a buttonhole gauge, or you can just eyeball it like I'm going to do. So now we're going to create the cap of our sleeve for our guy. And we are going to now, so we're on page 4, step 4, create the sleeve cap following the visuals in the diagram. So we're going to now draw a horizontal line where the lines on each side of A intersect kind of this roof-shaped line. And this stuff, you know, we kind of rewrite this kind of stuff, and we look at different books to see how other people have written it. It's confusing usually until you've done it once or twice, but always look at the diagram. So now we're going to figure out some points on the cap of the sleeve. So we're going to mark points G and F, and if you look at the diagram, G is halfway down. So you can also imagine that from A you have a horizontal line. G is going to be halfway down where it's shown in the diagram, and F is only going to be 1/4 of the way down. And that's because we want the back of the sleeve higher to give the guy a little more motion. Some stretch sleeves, you can also just fold it in half and mirror it is fine too. But if you want it a little more gourmet, the back of the arm should be a little bit higher in the cap. Okay, now, so this just showed where we found those points. Now on page 5, we're going to put another line going across where these outside vertical lines are hitting. And that's going to be H and J. So this is H here, this is J here. And this is also similar to the sleeve drafting in the costume technician's book. So now we are going to use a curved ruler, and pardon all the lint on my sweater, and we're going to connect all these points. So we're going to connect A, G, and H. And then we are going to connect that down to our arm's eye. I'm going to lose the roll of paper. And then we are going to connect A, F, and J. So the back should look higher than the front. If it looks completely symmetrical, lower your front or raise your back. We're going to connect that. And now on page 6, we're going to start connecting all these outside points. So you can go from each side of your arm's eye straight down to the wrist. If you want a quick version of this, it'll fit pretty much exactly the same as if you give your sleeve some more curves. But since we know some of these curvy parts, we're going to kind of follow the curves. So we're going to go kind of from the bicep towards the elbow with a curve. And then I like to have just a little bit of a curve out for the, imagining that there's a forearm there. But you can also just continue totally straight down, is not a problem. So we're going to do that. You can go straight down here or put a tiny little bit of curve in it. And even when we make stuff like this and you wind up pinching some out and taking it in, I find by having just a little bit of shape in it, it kind of helps the Lycra actually stay in those places. Then it being a straight line, it kind of fits the forearm, snugs in a little bit, and then fits the bicep. Then let's do the last thing on the sleeve, which is if you want to make more gusset. So when we're doing our body block, right, we have a back shoulder, a back arm, a front shoulder, and a side seam. There's our front neck, right? Here's our front body block. Here's our back body block. To get, when a sleeve is standing away from the body at the armpit and you want to take away and take away and take away, it usually means that you need to add to your pattern. So when we do our block here in a little bit, we're going to add a little bit to the armpit in the front and back. And we're going to also add a little bit to our sleeve, because if we have enough fabric to get under the arm, it's less likely to stand away from the arm, okay? So we're going to put a gusset. We're going to make a built-in gusset. And all that means is we're going to now, this point K in the diagram and point L, we want to fit up to J and H. And will you grab me one of those blue flexible rulers? I just don't have enough length on my microphone. This is like the only time I've ever used this flexible ruler, but it's really handy. So I'm going to measure from J to L and scoot up my ruler to figure out how long my gusset should be. And the higher you put the armpit, the more range of motion they're going to have. And also, the more you fill in this curve here on either side, the more you soften that curve, also the more motion they've got. They might have a few more wrinkles when they put their arm down, but it's going to fit when they raise their arms up. And then I'm going to just reblend that into here. I think we get them at Office Max. Probably the last couple that we bought for classes, we just got on Amazon. And the thing, this one's just is a is that Staedtler? S-T-A-E-D-T-L-E. Staedtler. Oh, Staedtler. It's at the office supply store. The thing to not goof up with is if you look at it, you'll see you can get some that's centimeters on one side and inches on the other, or inches and inches. Inside this tube, the rulers slide back and forth So if you have one that's inches and inches, just because this side shows 3 inches, don't assume that the 3 inches is lined up on the other side. And the other thing to remember is that 0 isn't at the beginning of the ruler. You actually have to look to see that you're starting at 0. Huh?
Because it doesn't bend very
Yeah, it doesn't. So just make sure that like 0 is on 0. So let's cut our sleeve out. And now we're going to do a block using the same ideas that we did and stuff from the patterning class. And if you haven't done our patterning class, you can absolutely do this. You just will want to get this great book. It's an excellent resource. And I think probably the majority of people. Does anybody not have this book who's watching live? I know that there's a handful of people that are just waiting for the recording and weren't going to watch live. Everybody's got this book.
No, one person doesn't.
It's I sent a link, but it's a costume technician handbook. And just kind of watch it on the internet. Different places have it at different prices. Used is perfect. There's a version that's newer with red on the cover. If the new version is cheaper, get the new version. But usually this older version is more affordable. And for those of you that want to follow along in your book, we're going to start at page 126. And whoever doesn't have a book, you can send Rachel a message right now, and I can send you these pages, but please buy the book so that we're not, stepping on anybody's toes by using something we haven't purchased. You can just write it on here. So we're going to start at page 126. And I'm going to measure our dress form because I measured the dress form for our tights pattern, okay? And let's see what measurements we start with. Then, like the sleeve and the short, we're going to take away volume. We're going to make some negative ease. That would be a good shirt. I have negative ease. And then the other shirt that we want to make just says, I have some notes, because that's what we're always telling people, Okay, so let's see what measurements it wants. We need the chest, the waist, the back neck to waist. We need the neck to shoulder, or I'm going to just say shoulder. We need the front width, and we need the back width. So I'm going to just measure my dress form really quick. So I'm going to measure around the fullest part of, see, this guy does kind of have a weird shape. My original chest is 37. Let's see, my original waist is 29. Since I'm on the front, I'm going to do my front width, or what we call a cross chest front. My front width is 13, and that's like, it's not at the nipples. It's like where your arm, it's like where the narrowest part of the armhole is. So that's my front width, and I'm going to say it's 13. My shoulder, he's got great big shoulders. We're going to say is 6. Now I'm going to spin him around, and we're going to do the back neck to waist. Again, the waist where he bends, where his ribs bend. And the back neck, I always tell people, it's like as if they were wearing a choker or a nice set of pearls. And some people have a bump there too. We're going to go from there down to the waist. And his is 18. So that's our back neck to waist. And then we also need the back width. So, oh, my mic's still working, right? I thought I unplugged it. It's good, the mic is working. My back width is 14 and a half. Most people, men and women, the back width is bigger than the front width. But depending on where a woman's chest is, the front width might be bigger than the back width. But generally, the back is bigger than the front. So now let's do some mathing again, like we've done before. And we're going to do the same reduction that we did with the tights. So we're going to make it tighter around, but not as tight up and down. So let's do our around measurements first. That's the chest, the waist, And the shoulder, even though the shoulder doesn't go around, it's like a horizontal measurement. And our front width and back width, that's what we're going to do first. And we're going to take those all times 0.88, which will make it 12% smaller. So 37 times 0.88 is like 32.5. I'll do this one more accurate instead of rounding. So my new chest is 32.5. My new waist is 25.5. You can round these two. My new shoulder, 6 times 0.88, is 5. My new front width is going to be 11.5. My new back width, 14.5 times 0.88, is going to be 12.7876. So I'm going to just say my new back width is 13. That's what's great about the stretch stuff, is you can round it up, round it down. Then just like the shorts, we're no longer interested in those original measurements. And now we've got to do our vertical one. The only vertical measurement we've got on this gentleman is his back, neck to waist. So 18 times 0.92, we're only going to make it 8% smaller, is 16.5. So then if we were adapting this set of stuff in the woman's section and wanted to make a tight lycra top, you can use our Leo base and blow it up, or you can just do the same ideas and change the adjust your shoulder to point, adjust your point to point, and the different measurements that are on a woman. I think those are the only two. So now we're going to look in the book, and a few of you have done the patterning where we've like done this really extensively. Some of you haven't. So I'm going to go through it kind of like not super fast, but also know that you can read this in more detail, read along when you watch this, when you watch the recording, when we send the recording. So we've got our original measurements, and now we're going to put a dart in this pattern. So we're just going to put our dart in. There's two ways you can do it. You can put your dart in by just using your adjusted measurements and use the same dart is totally fine. Because we've already shrunk it around. Hopefully that should make sense. Or don't use your adjusted measurements and then adjust your dart. You'll get the same within tiny bit of the same result. So I want to know the difference between the waist and the chest, and then it says as in the female block, so it's just like we did. So my chest is 32.5 and my waist is 25.5. So the difference is 7 inches. So my dart is going to be 3/4 of an inch. So I'm going to have a waist dart that's 3/4 of an inch. So then in this next column on page 126, it wants to know our waist dart. It wants us to figure out half of our chest. We don't care about the original chest anymore. We just care about our adjusted one. So half of my chest is 16.25. And we're only drafting half of the body. It wants to know 1/4 of the back, neck to waist. So our new back, neck to waist is 16.5. So 1/4 of our back, neck to waist will be 4 1/8, I think, or something really close to that. We want to know half of our front width. 11.5, that's 5.5 1/4, so that's 5 3/4. And we want to know half of our back width. Our back width was 13, so that's going to be 6.5. Ready to rock and roll. Okay, so we're going to start out by making a box that is our back, neck to waist, up and down, and across it is going to be half of our chest, which is 16.5. So I'm going to make a rectangle that is the adjusted back, neck to waist is 16.5, And then our chest across is 16 1/4. So we're ending up with pretty much a square here. So I'm going to go up and down 16 1/2. And then for those of you that did do the pattern drafting with us, you can do that same thing where we left a gap at the side where we drafted the front on its own and the back on its own so that you can add in a hip. But for today, we're going to do it closer to what's in the book. So I'm going to go 16 1/2 by 16 1/4 wide. And you don't want to start at the end of your paper. You want some room to mess. And then eventually we're going to divide this in half vertically. So I'm going to just figure that out now. Half of 16 1/4 is 8 1/8. And they're going to, all these lines are going to be 16 1/2 tall. I can't believe how nice the weather is outside. It's just gorgeous. It's not dark yet. It's been dark by 3:30 most days. Okay, so now I'll probably not go in order of the book, but I'm going to go close. So now we have points A, C, B, and D. If anybody that hasn't done patterning with us is interested, you can email me and let me know. And our patterning course was a little pricey because we did like sleeves, tops, pants, collars, a whole bunch of parts. But it's in thirds, so if you're interested in getting the part where we just deal with this for a woman and woven stuff, we can also sell you just that portion of that class. So just that's something you can email. Okay, so we've got that. Now we are going to figure out the front neck. So the next thing where this gets a little bit different is we also, in the book now, where if it has us going to the left or right, so this says to make the neck go 3 inches to the left and 3 inches, 2.5 inches down, we need to adjust that for stretch too. So the instructions to shrink the top for the guy, you need to also shrink these measurements. So where it says for me to go to the left 3 inches and up 1/2 inch, I'm going to actually go to the left 3 times 0.88, which is 2.6 or like 2 5/8. And then I'm not going to go up a whole inch either, or 1/2 inch. I'm going to go a little bit less than 1/2 inch. So that square that you end up making 3 inches square is actually going to now be 2 5/8 square. I just need to push that on the floor. Oh, I did it. Okay. So did I lose anybody there where I said now the measurements that are in the book, whether it's vertical or horizontal, you also need to adjust them? Or know that it's smaller. So if it says 3 inches, go just a little less than 3 inches. Like the next thing we're going to do is measure down from the AC line to place our shoulder in. It says to go down 1 3/8. Since I'm dealing in stretch or something that's smaller, I'm going to just go a little bit less than 1 3/8. I'm going to go like 1 1/4. Or you can take the calculator and take the vertical measurement times 0.92. Just one person say, yeah, I get where you're going with this, before I just keep going and I don't want anybody to be left behind. Yeah? Got it? Okay. So just as we adjusted our measurements, we're adjusting whatever measurements this tells us, right? So like the back neck, it tells us to go over from A 2.5 inches. We're not going to go 2.5 over. We're going to go 2.5 times 0.88, which is like 2 1/4. Or you can guess. And it says to go up from A 1/2 inch. I'm going to just go up 3/8 of an inch. So that's going to be my back neck. This is going to be my front neck. And for the couple of you that this is new, it's better to make a woman's block from the book. Don't do a stretch block. Start out with a woven block. Do you want to shut that one blind if it'll shut? Oh, you want to? Thank you. You're the nicest. It's better to start off with doing work through this from the book just as it is before you start monkeying with a reduction. But for most of you, this is like in your wheelhouse already, or should seem familiar. Does it change it? Where you're standing helps. I don't think it's the blinds. I don't know. Yeah, that did it. Well, it's better. That's better. So now we're going to put our new shoulder in, or actually, should I try to kind of follow it in the book? To determine our shoulder, we're going to put the small side of our ruler. So this is point K, and I don't put all the points in. I hope that doesn't upset anybody. We figured out our new shoulder is 5 inches instead of 6 inches. So I'm going to go from K down to where it hits that line, only 5 inches. Okay, then we are going to, so we did our front neck. We figured out kind of where our back neck is, also in this same set. We're figuring out where the shoulder is. Now we're going to figure out the front armhole. So the other construction lines that we need to put in, so if you look at step 2, it talks about adding construction lines. We divided our back neck to waist into 4, and our new smaller number is 4 1/8. So from AC, I'm going to come down 4 1/8 and 4 1/8. So I'm coming down 1 and 4. This quilting ruler has an extra ½ inch at one end, and it drives me crazy. 4 1/8, 4 1/8. So this is going to be our armpit here in a minute. And the next thing that it does on page 127 is we put in the front armhole, okay? And then we're going to figure out the front waist. So we took our front width, we reduced it. Our front width was 13. We reduced it to 11 1/2, and then we divided it in half because we're only dealing with 1/2 of the front. So I'm going to go over 5 3/4 from point H. 5 3/4. And that is going to make our front armhole. And you can connect these 2 points, the shoulder to the front armhole, with a straight line, and then use your curved ruler. Or if it seems like your curved ruler will get you all the way there, you can do it all with a curved ruler. And then what I tell people in the patterning class is you'll start to get familiar with like what this shape should look like. If your math and your measurements tell you the point is there, and you feel like it's here, split the difference. You're going to have it's better to be like halfway too big or halfway too small somewhere than to like commit to something that's totally wrong. Now let's figure out our front waist and the side seam. So we are going to step 5, side seam. To the left of me, we need 1/4 of the waist, and I don't think I figured that measurement out. So my new waist, my waist is 25 1/2. I'm going to divide that into 4. It's like 6 3/8-ish. So to the left of D, I need to go over 1/4 of my waist plus the dart that we determined. So 1/4 of my waist plus 3/4. And then just to make this look nice, we're going to scoot the seam a little bit towards the back because it'll make the person look like they're standing up straighter. And that's something that somebody else figured out. So we're just gonna honor that. So we're gonna go 6 3/8, 1/4 of our waist, plus dart, plus 3/4, plus 1/4 of an inch. And that's all step 5. So if you read that, it's, you know, the writing and my blabber should combine into one perfect thing. Now we're going to put in the front waist dart. So we're going to go between these 2 spots, between our side seam and D, and we're going to find the middle. So 7 1/2, that's 3 1/4. Now, depending on your styling, sometimes I like to move the dart a little bit closer to the side seam because I think it makes the guys look a little more attractive if the front is wider than the side than having them be kind of like equal width. So I'm going to go all the way up to the line where the armpit is. And my 3/4 inch dart, I'm going to center on either side. Oh, I did that poorly. I'm going to center my dart on either side of that. So we now have a shrunken front that will fit our dress form. So let's move on to the back. So we figured out our back neck. I jumped ahead, so step 7. So again, where it says to go over 2.5, I'm really going over less than 2.5 because of the reduction in stretch. Boy, my lips look terrible. It's this time. It just looked like I had herpes lip there or something. I don't have herpes. So now, fun fact, I don't have herpes, but I need a haircut. Now we are going to, so we've done the back neck. You can read that. And now we're going to do the back shoulder. So on H, we went over half of our adjusted front width. From G, we are going to go to the right half of our adjusted back width. So my back width, my adjusted back width is 6.5. And it tells us to go up 3 inches from that point. I'm really going to go a little less. I'm going to go 3 inches times like 8%. I want to do 8% less. I'm going to go up like 2 3/4. So there's 1, 2 3/4. If you went up to 3 inches, it's not a problem. If you did the front neck without changing anything, it's not much of a problem. These are slight adjustments. Then, in a normal woven thing, we make the back shoulder longer, which is what the book describes, so that there's some ease in the back. But since this is stretchy fabric, we don't really need to add any extra ease. So our front shoulder was 5 inches. So I'm just going to make our back shoulder 5 inches. You could make it 5.5 to give a little more room for strain in the back, but we're going to make this out of Lycra, so it doesn't matter. Same thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect that with a straight line, or if my curved ruler will do it all, I can do it all at once. And I'm finding this, like, I'm going to split the difference here. Like, I kind of feel like maybe his back armhole is more between those 2 points. So I've got my back armhole. Now let's put in the back dart. So we're going to skip all the way to step 11 and put in the back waist dart. So we're going to find, actually we need to do the back side seam. We need to do step 10. To the right of B, we're going to do like we did in the front. We're going to take our quarter of our waist, which is 6 3/8. But we have to add the dart to that because the dart's going to get taken away. So we're going to go 6 3/8 plus 3/4 of an inch. Now in the front, we added a quarter. In the back, we're going to take away a quarter. So we're actually going to go, we're going to take away a quarter from the back so that the person looks like they're standing really straight. For some reason, if you put the side right at the side, it's not as nice as scooting it back just a tiny little bit. Because if you're like me, you need more fabric in the front. Anyway, I'm going to get in shape one of these days. Tomorrow I'm going to get in shape. I'm going to do that big long list of things I said I was going to do. Okay, now let's put our back waist dart in. So it wants us to find the point between the B and our new side seam. So let's find that. It was 7 inches-ish, so I'm going to go 3.5 inches over. And then, 1 inch below the chest line. Then it says, from the point, draw a perpendicular point 1 inch below the chest. So this chest is actually the armpit here. Where the armpit is what it's calling the chest line. I often like stuff to fit a little bit tighter, so I take it all the way up to the chest, but we're going to do what it says and go a little bit below the chest. So I'm going to center my 3/4 of an inch on either side of that point. And I'm going to go, when we're making like a fitted bodice, when you're making something fitted in woven fabric, you can kind of adjust your block to fitting more like a glove or less like a glove. Which reminds me, I emailed somebody something. I need to make a note.
You want me to write it?
No, I emailed a lady a tunic pattern, and I think she might have selected a too small of a size. Everybody, our tunics are like fitted exactly to the measurements, so it's better to order a size bigger.
Have you sent those tunic patterns? Someone was asking.
I'm sizing the last one. So I think from the men's class,
Yeah.
I've almost done sizing the last one. So, but I'm going to let everybody pick two.
Yeah.
So that should be done in the next day or two.
Yeah.
We just have to proof them and then they're ready to go. So it's on its way, but I'm going to give you a bonus one. So now we have our stretch block. We have our stretch body, our stretch sleeve, and our stretch tights. So let's go ahead and start combining some of this stuff and doing just right Australia lady tunic note. And thanks, Rachel. A different Australia lady. I don't even know who it is. Maybe she's here in the class. Add a little to your side seams. Okay, so now let's do some pattern truing up. We're going to measure the cap of our sleeve. We're going to measure our armhole. We want our cap to, if anything, be a little bit bigger or just fit. So stretch stuff, you can still stretch the armhole some and ease the sleeve onto it. So let's measure our cap on both. And actually, what I showed you earlier is for stretch stuff, I like to raise the armpit a little bit, like a 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch. So I'm actually going to raise the armpit a little bit. If you're making a teeny tiny kid, raise it a little less. If you're making a giant, raise it a little bit more. So we're going to raise up the armpit just a little because it's stretchy. And if we had an underarm to waist measurement, say we knew how far it is from the guy's armpit to his waist, we'd take that times 0.92 and make this that same length. So I just raised that a little bit. And now let's check our sleeve cap. So the front of the sleeve is on the left, the back of the sleeve is on the right. I'm going to use my flexible ruler again. I'm going to find 0, and I'm going to measure the front of my sleeve is like 8 1/4. And then I'm going to measure the back. I'm measuring them separately. My back is 9, which is good. The back should be a little bit longer than the front. Now, let's see how we are with the actual armhole of our body. So this is called like reconciling a pattern or truing up a pattern. My front armhole is 8. That's great. It's a smidge smaller. So we've got a 1/4 inch ease to stretch from our sleeve to our front. And let's measure our back. And if anything, we want a little more in the back. Our back armhole is 7 1/2. I should clean up what I said. If anything, we want more on the back of our sleeve, not necessarily the back armhole. So it's totally fine that this back armhole measures 7 1/2 and the front measures 8, because if you think of the anatomy of a person, you've got more length going around the front to your armpit than you do just from your shoulder down to your armpit. So this curve should end up measuring longer. And then if this back is 7 1/2 of our back armhole and our back sleeve is 9 inches, that means that the back of our sleeve is 1.5 inches bigger, which is pretty spot on. You want like 1 inch to 1.25 inches, so that we're going to stretch this on there just a little bit so there's a little bit of ease in the sleeve. But if you make this up and you're like, I want the sleeve to fit perfect, all you're going to do is figure out how much to fold out. You're going to just fold out from the cap of your sleeve and then blend it back together until your measurements meet exactly. So let's cut this out. Would you look in that Lycra box and see if you think there's anything big enough for me to cut something this size? We might just cut our tights like down to the calf, depending on what chunks of fabric we've got. Okay, so I know that was a quick body block, but I just want everybody that's a return offender to see how you can start combining all these different things that we've done over the last year. We've been doing webinars, and that the sky is the limit, and that there are no one way to do any of this stuff. What's it look like?
This, I don't know.
We're doing a little fabric shopping. Maybe we do one leg and one, boy.
We do different colored legs.
Oh, how big is this? This is
about
probably big enough. We could do 2 different colors. Actually, I think this might fit 2 legs. Yeah, with this, this will fit 2 legs. So we're gonna make a pair of blue tights. So while I cut this out and ramble, does anybody have any questions before I do the next chunk of this? For the new folks, I am going to send you on our Facebook page. We have a link to different ways to like bind the necks and bind armholes of things. So instead of the last part of this be just serging and stuff, I'm going to send you a link to that. And then everybody that's taken Leo 2, finishing off the man's stuff is pretty similar to finishing off the woman's stuff. But I'm going to show you some different waist and crotch stuff here in a minute, okay? And then as far as like styling your thing, we'll turn this into a stretch shirt that has a little bit of style, but you can put a seam anywhere you want to seam, right? And we're going to say that the short, we usually just tell people if you're using it like this, it has seam allowance in it, don't add it. If you're starting to put in lots of cuts, then you need to start adding whatever the seam allowance of your serger is. And something that we talked about a little bit more the other day in our Leo 2 class is lots of folks will, make a dress with a whole bunch of vertical seams in it. And they will have added 1/4 of an inch at every seam because they're like, my serger's 1/4 of an inch. Then they make it and it's huge, and they measure their serger and they actually find out that their serger's like 3/16 of an inch and not 1/4. And when you start adding up all those like little adjustments, it'll make a difference. So let's first just bang together a pair of tights. Okay, right, so I want to, before I bang together my pair of tights, I want to make this now into my dream unitard pattern. So check it out. My front almost fits perfectly to my side of my short tights, my short with combined tights. When I close the dart in my back and in my back here, it almost fits perfectly, but I have little discrepancies, right? Like my back waist of here is a little bit longer than the waist of my pant. So this is where you split the difference. So rather than cutting all of this off of the torso, this difference that you've got, you're going to actually add a little bit to the back of your short and take away a little bit from the waist of your back, your torso body block, rather than taking it all from one spot or the other. And you can also take more time to figure out like, well, why doesn't it fit perfect? And you can start taking a little more precisely, or center the back over the back and then make your adjustment to get something that's even more truer, right? I should make a pair of tights. Does that seem like the next most rational thing to do? So right, these things are full of darts. If you don't want these darts, all you're going to do now, let's just get rid of the darts together. If you don't want these darts in here, since this is a stretch item, we're just going to take away the darts at the sides. So if we want our front to be on the fold of our stretch item, so you can combine this to the tights, and you want your back to be on the fold, we're going to just take the dart away totally at the side now, which is okay in stretch fabric. So my 3/4 inch dart that was in the middle, I'm now going to take away completely at my side. So this is the like give and take thing. So I've taken away that dart there. I'm going to cut it off. Then now you can just kind of imagine that what I took off there is now replaced what was in that dart. So I have the same fit, okay? But I've made my pattern less complicated because I don't want a dart in my stretch thing. So let's do the same thing at the back. Where I had 3/4 of an inch, I'm going to go up to this same place, like that, and I'm going to take that away now at the side. I don't need to go all the way to the armpit because the original dart didn't go all the way to the armpit, even though I kind of did. So that now will fit in there. So we're going to have the same fit had we serged in a dart, okay? And that ties back into all the stuff we did in the patterning course. Now, I mean, you can just keep going. If you want a man's thing without a side seam, you can just tape your side seam together and have a front that's on the fold and a back with the seam. So now your stretch, if you have a fabric that's more stretchy around and a little less stretchy up and down, even though your back isn't on the grain anymore, the stretch fabric's a little more forgiving because you might not want a side seam in this. So you can just cut the front on the fold and know that the back is off just a tiny bit. Or you can straighten it out a little bit. You can straighten the two shapes out. And then, so if I didn't want my back to be off grain, that makes sense to everybody, right? My front is on the straight or on the fold. My back is lilty over here. If I don't want that lilt, or say I have a motif that I don't want to interrupt that way, you can straighten it out here, measure this giant wedge here, and that you will take out at the back. So then you'll have a back that's shaped like that, where it's most of the back is straight up and down. Okay, so we took this away over there. Like there's some stretch patterns that I've done over the years where there's hardly any seams, and you have this weird cutout in the back so that you can have like an uninterrupted design, like a more fluid thing. And early in my career, I was all about, oh, less seams is better. But I like to have some seams because it's easier to fit stuff. Like if you've got no seam in the side, but you have too much fabric, you have to put a seam in there anyway. Okay, let's make this pair of tights up. Let's make some changes to it too. I'm going to want that later. I'll just go get it later. Okay, here's the changes that I want to make in my tights. I don't want this dart under the guy's butt. So part of it we got rid of. Now I've got to get rid of like a quarter and a quarter in a couple places. So I'm going to take away like a quarter over here, and I'm going to take away a quarter over there, and I'm going to kind of mark where the bottom of my dart was, and I'm going to go to that point. So I'm moving my dart, the underbutt dart. We're going to take it out totally. And actually, it's not doing a whole lot anyways. So I'm going to take out some of my underbutt dart in the front. What would that be? The UBD. We're going to remove the UBD in the front. We're going to take away some underbutt dart in the back. And we'll make this on the fold just because that's like super, super cool and trendy. So then I'm going to just take out that little bit. And even if you didn't take it out, you're probably going to be all right. But you can put seams wherever you want. So like you could also turn this dart and your underbutt dart into a seam that runs all the way, I lost my Sharpie, that runs all the way down the back. And there's actually some older patterns in some of the, there's a lot of old Jerome Robbins ballets that have been remade, but like I've had my hands on a lot of the original tights. A lot of them have this seam. So whoever was the maker in New York kept this seam at under their butt and down the back because it gave you a place to mold it over their butt. And if you're making jersey or stretch and sew stuff, sometimes you'll want that seam because it doesn't, like jersey or like double knit or triple knit, doesn't always stretch the same as Lycra. But we've gotten rid of that dart and we're not going to do this seam, okay? Now, let's get rid of this back dart at the butt. So this dart that's here, actually, we're going to keep a dart. So I think it's going to be more attractive design-wise. We're going to take away an inch more at the center back, but I'm going to leave this dart in over the butt because that's where the curve of their body is. So this side seam dart, instead of having it right here, I'm going to move it to my back. So I'm going to take out an extra inch at my center back. Okay, and I still kind of want the height of M. So if it looked like we were losing our height, I might add some of it back in, but we're not going to lose much. So instead of the side dart, I'm going to move him to here and blend it back together and cut that out. So we are now going to just keep this dart that's here over the butt. If we didn't want any darts in this, we would also take this dart out of the center back, and then you just have a fold with no, a pair of pants with just a fold in the front. I'm going to show you how to do a fold in the front. I didn't cut it. So now let's make the front on the fold. The thing we need to know, so you can serge this up just like this, stitch your crotch together, you're going to have an excellent pair of tights. But if we want to make the front without a seam, we're going to mark where our front crotch joins the front. I'm going to put a big triangle wedge right there. And then I'm going to cut that off. And I'm going to say that the center front of my tights is now on the fold. And then I have this kind of like little itsy bitsy point here, which I don't need. I'm going to just take my rotary cutter and like kind of blend that teeny little point into a teeny little curve. And what I've taken off the front, I'm now going to add to the back because we still need the same shape in the crotch. So we're going to end up with something that looks more like this. And same thing here. I kind of have this like little notch out here. Over here, I shaved off a little tiny bit. We're going to give that back. Whoa, almost knocked your water onto your computer. So I'm going to add a little bit there. So what I kind of took away from the front, I'm going to kind of add to the back, just because I don't want to try to serge like a weird angle. So I'm going to curve that out there. Okay, like that. And let's say we're only going to make these go down to the guy's calf. We don't need this all this length. So I'm going to cut just a couple inches below the calf, so there would be something in theory to him. Okay, okay, okay. We're keeping this dart over the butt, but let's make these lower rise, right? Let's make, so to change, to drop it down from the waist, I want to pretend as if my darts are gone. And actually, this side dart is gone. So I don't have to fold him up, but I'm going to keep this dart. So I'm going to fold that dart up. And I am going to draw or measure in something that's like 2 inches below the front. So I'm going to just make a new, I'm going to make a brand new lower. We're not making, so the, like, right, for ballet, you want the tights usually to go up way under the guy's rib cage with the suspenders, so that if his tunic moves up and down, you don't see the tights. But we're going to say that we're doing tights for somebody who's shirtless. We're going to make some shirtless tights here. Now, if I was putting this seam in, I would add 1/4 inch on either side, or if I'm putting in like vertical style lines where more things are going to get serged, I've got to add more seam allowance. But I'm going to say that I'm just making a pair of blue tights. I'm only going to add a little bit of seam allowance at the top to finish off the top edge. So the top edge, you can make a separate casing. If you wanted a casing to fit elastic through, we usually make the casing a couple inches. We actually make the casing a smidge smaller than the tight, so that the casing is pulling in the fabric a little bit, and then the elastic pulls in it a little bit more. But what I'm going to show you now is how to take a fat elastic. We're going to stitch it to the top and roll it into the tight, so that the top looks a little bit more seamless and sexy. Because who is it that says make it sexy? Not Peter Farmer. Timothy Goodchild. Boy, Peter Farmer died a couple years ago, but he's from London too. I can't keep all the people we've worked with alive. Oh my gosh, the number of amazing people that I've worked with that have died is higher than the number of people I've worked with probably that are alive. I mean, Tim's next. It's just I'm nice, I promise. We love Tim. But we've learned a lot from him. Okay, so our front, I'm going to cut my front on the fold, and I put my fold on this side, so I'm going to just cut my tights upside down. And, oh, I don't have quite enough. Maybe if I fold it the other way. So we're going to put an elastic that rolls down. Is anybody feel like they're lost when I said you can just tape the top onto the tights? Does anybody feel it? Is anybody feeling it? Just because it's very similar to what we did in the Leo 2 course. And if any of our new folks are interested in our Leo courses, let me know, because we can sell you those recordings. And they're loaded with good stretch stuff too. So I am going to cut this out. And then remember this part we marked where we cut the front crotch and moved it to the back? We're going to slit the fold of the fabric up to that point. And I'm going to add like a 1/2 inch at the top, so I've got something to slide or something to use with my elastic there. And I think the other reason why I don't add seam allowance if it's just this, basic thing is I kind of err on stuff being a hair tighter than it probably needs to be. Because often we're with stretch stuff and like a professional skater or gymnast, dancer, they're usually going to want you to take it in a little bit anyway. But like with that reduction, when we were taking stuff times like 0.88, if you find you've made something similar to this or made some blocks a couple times, oh, look, I added a 1/4 anyway, and you're taking away, if you're like, oh, I'm always taking away about 1 inch, just use your calculator and figure out what that reduction would have been, and then you can just take it away ahead of time. And like another thing that we're always, oh, I grabbed just the worst rotary cutter we've got. Often too, we're taking in people's ankles and knees a little bit. So sometimes we'll draft a pattern and then just take away a smidge more in one of those places where we know we're probably going to take it in. Oh, geez. I grabbed the wrong rotary cutters completely. Put new blades in your rotary cutters. Don't do like me. So now this front, we have to slit the fold up to where we cut the crotch off of. So we're going to slit the fold up to there. Now let's serge these together and put an elastic in it. So I just got a few random colors in the serger, and I'm going to just serge this together quick so we can look a little bit more at chopping up the pattern and look at how to put in a nice elastic. I'll probably just flip that sewing machine around. So the first thing I'm going to do is put in my 2 darts. Or if you're at a Lutheran dinner party, dirts, put your dirts in. And if these were the real deal, I'm going to run a tail off and I would knot the serging at the bottom of the dart. So I'm running off a tail so that I can knot it. And actually, hand me that little screwdriver there. Something I learned from Sabina was when you make your little knot, if you put in an awl or a pin or something, you just pull your tail and then you can slide the knot all the way to the dart using a little tool. Then you'd cut the extra tail off. Right? That's a good trick. I've struggled forever, and then she showed me that one day, and I'm like, oh my gosh, life-changing stuff. So I'm going to do my other one. And I'm going to run off a tail. So same thing, if this was a dart in the top, do the same thing. Right. I'm going to run off a tail, tie my loop.
They can see Louie in his bed.
Oh,
His bed is so comfy.
He's resting on Dog Island.
Nice,
That's
like
small
custom.
Dog Island.
Travis made a custom dog bed.
A giant one. So then you can cut that tail off too. We tend not to fray check stuff like that because it's scratchy. So when we fray check, we're usually trying to fray check things that aren't scratchy. So now I'm going to do my back of my seat, my back crotch here. Watch, I'll surge off the microphone cord. Back when everybody had a Walkman, I don't know how many times I cut my Walkman cords off. Well, a CD Walkman. So I've done my back crotch. Now I'm going to where we slit that fold. So this is my back crotch and my front crotch joined to it. I like to put this point on the underside of my serging process. And we're actually, when we serge it, I'm going to shave off just a little bit of that point because it's a little easier to serge. Or you can fold that part together in your pattern and like address it there and make it end up a little less pointy. And now that I know what 2 points I've got to line up, I'm going to bring them together. And you can put some notches on your pattern too to give you stuff to line up. And the other thing you could do on your pattern is, and I meant to do it but I didn't, measure both sides of your leg and see if something is coming out drastically longer or shorter, and then make an adjustment to your pattern. Either add a little length or take away a little length on whichever side. And sometimes on a man's tight pattern or unitard pattern, there'll be a little bit more on the back leg on purpose to give them room for their butt. But by having that dart back there, they've already got a little bit of room for their butt. So I just trimmed off a little bit of that. And then the trick is to try to get all this to line up again. Some folks, I know when the front is on the fold, they'll just use a sewing machine and stitch just that little part with the sewing machine so they can check and see how it's lined up. And then serge it.
That's the only spot I put it in.
Just the one, yeah. Then you could serge around your hem and fold it up and zigzag over it or use a twin needle or a cover stitch. But let's put elastic in this before we put it on the dress form. So there's more than one way. Oh, you know what? Should this be clipped on me too? That's what I've been dealing with all day. I never clipped I've just been dragging the battery around.
It's like, why haven't we had this problem before?
I don't know. Just a second, a little technical difficulty. Well, I can't make it clip. Ugh. Anyway, so, and the new folks too, I'm going to send you a link for different finishes, but I want to show you a couple more little things. So, you know, earlier we talked about, I said true up your edges. You want to see that this point on your front and back is a very similar length to the seam. You know, if you measured it and twisted it all together. If something comes a little short or a little long, you can shorten the back a tiny bit. You can cut across it and add or take away a little bit, but pretty much it should come out pretty close. And if the back is like an inch longer, it's okay. Match your knee and then ease the rest in. Let's take some elastic, and it's best if you can wrap this around the dude, like fit the tights and fit the elastic separate. Oh, I missed a haul. Don't tell anybody. I was surging fast. But so now we have this nice front. We have some shape in the back, and our back sits higher than our front. So there's some fabric to go over the guy's butt. But let's put some elastic in here. So you could serge a casing in there. You could serge a casing in and run elastic through your casing. Or what I've found really great for, like, when the tights don't have a jacket over it. So if the tights aren't going up under the guy's chest, if they're going up under his chest, just add to the top of the tights, add up here. But if the tights are like featured and he's shirtless, one thing that's going to help it sit nice is if you put the elastic straight around, what it does is it pushes the butt down and it pulls the front in a weird way. So think about how here our back is higher than our front. It's hard to see. The back of our tights higher than the front. We want our elastic to kind of do the same thing. So what I like to do, I'm going to just kind of measure twice, plus a little bit. And this you should fit on the person. Or just make sure that your elastic is a smidge smaller than the top of your tights. What I like to do is shape my elastic. So if I take the tights out, I'm overlapping the center front of this some, so that my elastic actually is kind of like a yoke. Like my elastic is flaring out at the sides. Does that show at all? So I'm laying my elastic, there it kind of shows, so that the back of my elastic is higher than the front. So we're making like a yoke with the elastic. So more butt, if they have more butt, angle it a little bit more so that there's higher elastic in the back. If they have less butt, don't angle it so much. But I generally drop the front like 3/4 of an inch to an inch. And I'm going to make this kind of just a hair narrower than my tights are laying on the table. And I'm going to pin my overlap. And then we're going to go to the sewing machine. So do people get what I'm saying here? Yeah, that I've pinned my elastic so that I actually have the shape of a body in there. And it's going to sit better on the guy. And the other reason I do that is lots of times you'll have it all perfect and the back of the tights stand away from the guy, like his butt lifts the waistband away. This way, your waistband is actually smaller at the waist and goes out over the hips so that it cuts into the guy. So let's sew this all and then put it on the dress form. Whoop, whoop, whoop. So what I'm going to do is just zigzag where my elastic is crisscrossing, right? Or if you want, you can just put like 2 rows down the middle. So I'm going to put a zigzag. I'm going to connect my elastic down the middle. So that's one way to do it. The other one would be to totally follow where it's overlapping. But just down the middle is good. I'm going to do 2 rows down the middle. And then I'm going to cut off all this stuff that's overlapping. Sometimes too, we'll make this same shape. When I was at the Joffrey, we would just make the same shape, but we would raise the back so that we don't have this seam in the front. So just think about like the shape of it. And I came up with this from looking at some older Joffrey tights, where they would take white elastic, and in the elastic they would cut a dart at each side like this and zigzag the dart closed, which does the same kind of thing. It makes a yoke. So at old Joffrey tights, they would cut a dart at each side and then zigzag the dart closed so that the tights waistband was shaped more like a human. So now I'm going to mark my front. Are there any pins? Would you hand me those pins? Thank you. So I'm going to find my front and back. I'm going to make my front and back. And I'm going to end up rolling it over to the inside. So I'm going to pin my front on. This will make sense here in just a second. So I'm putting my elastic on the outside first, and I'm going to zigzag around it. Oh, good. And my elastic is a little smaller than my Lycra, because we want the elastic to be the tightest thing, not the Lycra, or equitight, the same. Equitight on the tights. So now I'm going to zigzag around this, and I'm actually going to stretch it some while I sew, because they're going to be less likely to pop stitches when they put it on. And I don't want a super duper short stitch either, because if I mess up, I don't want to have to take out an angry grouping of knots. I'd rather just take out something I can see. But if you stretch this, it's going to come out more stretchy. And cover stitching is great too. Just remember, it's a nightmare to take out. Unless you're like one of the 4 people on the planet that have figured out exactly what part of what stitch to pull, and then it comes out really, really easy. Barbara Luxinger, that's the only person I know that like really knows. So you can trim off all your serger mess. So I'm just continuing to stretch this because my elastic is a little bit smaller than my Lycra. And then as I get around to the front, I want to make sure I'm not getting weird bumps and puckers. I was going to say buggles. You don't want weird buggles. That's a woodgy bubble. Bungles. You don't want equitight and bungles. So, and then I'm going to reverse again. So this is more of like a fashiony waistband, like where if the tights are featured. So now we want to flip that all over. And we can restitch around the top. So I'm going to flip my fitted elastic to the inside. Got to wet your fingers a little bit to do this. And now I'm going to just stitch around the top. So there will be a stitch at the top, but there's not a casing, right? And I just want to make sure that like I'm not yanking the elastic over, but I also don't want bubbles of fabric at the top. I'm just making sure it's nice and even. So I'm going to roll that to the inside. Use matching thread. A double needle looks nice here too. You can even straight stitch this as long as you stretch it so that the fabric is kind of maxed out with the stitch so they don't pop it. A little thick where my serging is. And then the last thing we're going to do, so hemming, you can put an elastic in the hem and fold it up if you want. Or you can just fold it up and zigzag it. Usually you don't have to make the hem of an ankle or calf length or whatever length. Usually you don't have to make it that much tighter. But then the next thing I'm going to do is where my darts are and my center back seam. There's that little hole I serged in earlier. I like to, where the darts and center back are, to straight stitch or stitch in the ditch to keep my elastic folded down in the back. I'm going to just do the 2 darts and skip the center back, just so you get the idea. I like to stitch that in the ditch, and then I like to stitch this other dart in the ditch. So we don't need to stitch the whole bottom of this elastic down, but you can if you want to. You totally can if you want to. Then, a lot of pieces that we would do at the Joffrey. So we still have the back higher than the front. We would just leave this like this to not have as many puckers and stuff so that it just looks like fondant icing, right? You want it to look like fondant. But you can also put, Maxine likes things to look like fondant, which is what we want our tights to look like. What? I know, but it's stuck. Make it look like fondant. So let's put this on the dress form. But you can see, like, if you want to stitch the bottom down, or if you want to bar tack at the sides to keep that folded down, you can also. So let's wrestle this onto the guy. And then we're going to look real quick a little bit more at combining pieces and then be done. So now, see, I'm going to be out of business. I'm teaching everybody how to make tights, how to make their own patterns. So then, if we give them chin and the shoulder. We can pull this whole works up. And remember, we lowered the waist, so this shouldn't fit to his waist anymore. We went down like 2.5-ish inches. Then, once we flip this around, so he can't zhuzh himself into it. So it looks like fondant. So we've got to do it ourselves. And this guy has just the worst shaped. He doesn't have a butt at all. But you kind of, how does the color show? How great is that? So now that I've got it on here, I'm even thinking like I could probably make the elastic a little bit tighter because it wants to flip just a tiny bit. Part of it is I used some antique elastic, but
what was the thin elastic for that you showed at the beginning?
Oh, yeah, I'll show you that here in just a second. Another thing. But then you can see that my back is still standing away a tiny little bit. Like I still have a little bit of room here. It just means that my elastic could be a little bit tighter. But we have the tights fitting evenly around his body and lower than his waist was kind of our goal. And then you can see where I said you can also cut it so that the overlap in your elastic is the back, not the front. Just do the reverse. So let me show you. Does anybody have questions about that? How great is that? It's like a perfect pair of tights. You can cut them high, you can cut them short. If you wanted to cut them high, or a lot of companies will make their tights high they'll make their tights high up with a shoulder strap, so it's like a unitard. You can just graft this on to your front, graft your chest onto your front, and just cut it with a skinny strap. Then they don't need elastic around the top at all, and it's more comfortable for the guys. And then if their jacket rides up, their tights go up to their tits pretty much. Wear your tights to your tits. But let me show you another couple things. One thing, we used to joke that the guys at the London Royal Ballet have the best crotches on the planet, like really shapely. Another thing we've done, and that I've done, and that I kind of picked up from some makers there, is you can take a 1/4-inch elastic like this. So just think this through. Anchor it to the bottom or the side of your elastic behind the side. So on the inside, right? I'm showing you on the outside. But on the inside, you can hook this to an elastic behind the side seam so that their butt is holding it up. Then you can run this, and in a very intimate fitting with the guy, you follow along under his dance belt, under his clementines, and you mark a spot on each side of each clementine, and you run elastic across that spot, and you zigzag the elastic to there. And what it does is that piece of elastic, so you could zigzag it from here under to about here, that pulls the thigh up a little bit, and it gets rid of that pillow that the guys hate, having that pillow on each side of their crotch. But that's like to like really make it a showcase, which some choreographers and companies, it's an important thing. The other place that you can use that elastic is sometimes the pillow in the front just means that they're clementines. That's what we're going to call balls now. They're clementines. The other thing that can happen is with that pillow in the front, if their stuff is pushing the front forward, you get a pillow on either side. You can yank the front to the back by taking a piece of elastic also. And you can, so this is the back crotch, right? I can say that from here to here, it's like making them international male tights, if anybody knows that catalog. Look at some international male underwear. A lot of them have this. You can mark a spot from the back crotch going towards the waist that's like 4 or 5 inches long. Then take a piece of thin elastic and make it like 1 inch smaller or 1.5 inches smaller than that space, so that it scrunches the tight fabric into their butt, and then that pulls the front towards the back. We call it like a razor stitch or an edge stitch, so that the front of their tight gets yanked towards the back, and then it really sucks into their butt. Because some dancers, and some gymnastic people, you'll see that like the tights frame their each butt cheek separately. And some places like it to kind of be a mono butt. So if you want a mono butt, don't do this. But if you want to sex it up a little bit, this is a good thing. Any questions about that? No. I think we're kind of done, but I just want to show you like, so a sleeve, we all get how a sleeve works, right? Serge it in, stick it in. But let's just turn this into something a little bit different really, really quick. So let's say that I want to make a bike length that's cut to like the space between the knee and the thigh. Let's say that I want the side seam cut. So I'm going to cut up my side seam, right? Then I can just start to marry my pieces together. So I'm going to marry my fronts together. And I've got a little extra here that we're going to deal with in just a second. And let's say that we also don't want this dart here. Let's see how it fits our back. Because we actually got rid of one of the darts earlier, if you remember to that. Our back fits really well. So we can put our backs together. Right. So now we have a block with the front and back. Here we have a discrepancy. They didn't marry together perfect. So instead of cutting 3/4 off to the back or adding 3/4 to the front, I'm going to just cut 3/8, so half of 3/4. I'm going to cut 3/8 off of my short and add 3/8 to my top, because it's better to split the difference than to make the whole alteration to one shape. Now, let's just say that our thing is going to have a sleeve. We've got our sleeve ready to go. There's our sleeve. But let's say we want it to have a horizon line with mesh. You're just going to figure out where you want your horizon line to be. So we're going to just cut across our front and back. And then here would be where we start adding seam allowance. So we're going to say that this is our front, our center front in Lycra, our center back in Lycra, and this is our front yoke. So anywhere you can put a chop, you can add or change the type of fabric. But now that we're starting to kind of chop into our original, I'm going to add seam allowance, whatever my serger is. I'm going to add seam allowance at my yoke and at the top of my Lycra. Add it to the top of your Lycra. Add it to the bottom of your yoke. But then you can just start having a blast with like, now I want to get rid of the shoulder seam. So just tape your shoulder seam together. And you can just continue on and on and on and on to make all sorts of different style choices. And that'll be familiar to the folks that took the Leo class. So anywhere you can put a cut, you can change the fabric. Like most Lycra stuff is just a base or a block, and then you just decide like where you do and don't want fabric. So similarly, if I wanted this to be like a wrestling unitard, I would go back to my original, and then I would just put in the cuts to make this like a wrestling unitard. So I'll do that really quick. We'll take the last couple questions, and hopefully you guys enjoyed this. So if I wanted to make a wrestling unitard, I know it has a skinny strap like that. Shunk, a little lower in the armhole. And then I would figure out where my strap joins the front strap. So what I cut off the front, I'm going to use to figure out my back. And then lots of times they have like a racer back like that. So I'm going to just put this great big old cut in like that. And now I have a man's wrestling tank or wrestling unitard. A singlet, that's the word. So it's endless. And then we will send the link to like, how do you deal with the armholes and stuff? Like you make the elastic a little smaller or make a binding a little smaller. You can line men's stuff, right? Now, if I wanted to make this thing with just the whole thing being on the fold, I would tape this together. And where my excess dart is, where all of this is, I'm going to just take it all out right there. And the cool thing about stretch is it's going to fit surprisingly almost the same. So if we cut this out now, we no longer even need this dart stuff here, because what we cut out there makes it so we don't need the dart. So this is now like a one-piece thing. And I think maybe a pattern we should sell. Question time. So hopefully that gives you guys some new guidance and confidence for just making some man stuff. It's a little easier than the girl stuff, I think. Once you draft your leg, you don't have breasts, so there's not so much to deal with.
How about a women's stretch bodice class?
I mean, it's the same idea. So, but we could, I think. Oh, Rachel, someone asked, how about a women's stretch bodice class? We can totally add that to a patterning one. And I think we have a couple women's stretch bodices that we've made in the past that hopefully with our new pattern club we will also get sized into some different things. But you can just take the same ideas from here and do your math for a woman's thing. So like if I wanted to make a woman's bodice out of moleskin lycra, which is thicker, or neoprene, it doesn't stretch as much as the lycra. So instead of taking it times 0.88, I might try taking it like times 0.92. So it's like a little bit smaller around, but not like super small around. And all of it, you have to make a sample. Make up one and see. Like we just made up this pair of tights, and already I'm like, I wish I'd have made the elastic a little bit smaller. So it's good, it's good to make samples and play with stuff. Any other questions? If not, I will wave from you down here, and we will sign off. This should process tonight and be sent out tomorrow, the recording.